In the modern world, technology and innovation are often seen as driving forces behind societal progress. The Internet, smartphones, social media, and the vast network of interconnected devices have revolutionized how we communicate, work, and live. Tech companies have played an undeniably pivotal role in this transformation. From companies like Google, Apple, and Facebook to emerging giants in artificial intelligence, blockchain, and data science, for many entrepreneurs, the idea of an open market, one that promotes the free exchange of information and ideas, is a cornerstone of technological advancement. These companies argue that to continue innovating and pushing boundaries, they must operate with minimal interference from the government. The freedom to experiment, to capture and analyze data, and to refine algorithms can lead to groundbreaking products and services that benefit consumers and economies alike. From a purely entrepreneurial perspective, the absence of regulation is essential for continued growth. Without the freedom to innovate freely, tech companies might find themselves shackled by bureaucracy, stifling the very advancements that could elevate society into the next phase of human progress. However, this emphasis on innovation and progress raises an increasingly important question. At what cost does this unregulated growth come? As tech companies harvest vast amounts of personal data that fuels not only their products and services, but also their profits, the privacy of individuals has become a crucial point of contention. The collection, storage, and usage of personal information are now the lifeblood of the digital economy, yet the more data these companies collect, the more vulnerable consumers become to exploitation. The very innovations that promise to improve our lives, recommendation algorithms, targeted ads, and voice-activated assistants, are often built on invasive data practices. The problem is that this data is frequently gathered without the informed consent of individuals, or at the very least, with a level of transparency that does not sufficiently educate users about the extent of the data collection or its potential implications. As we witness breaches of personal data, such as those experienced by millions of Facebook users in the Cambridge Analytica scandal, or the unauthorized tracking and selling of location data by companies like Google, the debate about privacy rights intensifies. These incidents have raised alarms about the power tech companies wield over the information that defines who we are. Our preferences, behaviors, relationships, and even our private conversations. The public's trust in tech companies is being eroded, and people are beginning to question whether the risks posed to their privacy are worth the convenience and innovation tech companies provide. A growing number of privacy advocates, from legal experts to grassroots organizations, argue that regulation is not only necessary to safeguard individuals' rights but essential to the health of democratic societies that depend on personal freedoms. On the other hand, proponents of an unregulated tech industry argue that the free market is the best mechanism to balance innovation with responsibility. The tech sector thrives on competition, and the ability of companies to innovate without government interference is seen as vital for creating new and better products. Many tech leaders would argue that regulation can slow down progress, making it harder for new ideas to reach the market, potentially putting the U.S. behind other countries in technological advancement. The question, however, is whether this relentless push for innovation comes at too high a price. Should companies that profit from personal data be required to protect that data more stringently? Or should their right to operate with fewer restrictions be preserved to ensure continued growth and development? The debate over regulating tech companies is not just about privacy. It is about finding the right balance between the entrepreneurial spirit that drives innovation and the fundamental human right to privacy that allows individuals to control their own personal information. As we move forward, The fundamental issue at the heart of this debate is the degree of responsibility that tech companies should bear for the collection, use, and protection of personal data. How can we, as a society, allow the freedom of innovation without compromising the values of transparency, consent, and privacy? This is a question that requires not only technological understanding, but also a deep reflection on the ethical responsibilities that come with the ability to access and control vast amounts of personal information. The next few paragraphs will explore both sides of this debate, offering insights from both a privacy advocate and a tech entrepreneur as they lay out their respective arguments for and against government intervention in regulating tech companies. From the perspective of privacy advocates, the unregulated expansion of tech companies raises significant concerns that cannot be overlooked. The rapid and unchecked collection of personal data by these companies has led to an erosion of privacy for millions of users worldwide. In an era where data is often equated with currency, tech companies are amassing vast amounts of personal information, everything from our browsing habits and online purchases to our locations, and even the most intimate details of our lives. This data, much of it collected without explicit or informed consent, is used to build detailed consumer profiles that allow companies to target individuals with unprecedented precision. The result is that users are often unaware of the extent to which they are being monitored, profiled, and influenced by the digital ecosystem they participate in. In the name of progress and personalization, personal autonomy is compromised, leaving consumers vulnerable to manipulation, exploitation, and even privacy breaches. To make matters worse, the sheer volume of data stored by these tech giants has become a prime target for hackers. Data breaches are increasingly common, with millions of individuals' personal information exposed due to lapses in security or malicious attacks. In 2020, for example, the personal data of over 500 million Facebook users was exposed in a major security breach. Such incidents not only expose consumers to the risk of identity theft, but also make them vulnerable to cybercrimes ranging from financial fraud to the use of their information in criminal activities. These breaches highlight the inherent risks of entrusting tech companies with vast repositories of sensitive data without sufficient oversight or accountability. This is where privacy regulation comes into play. Advocates argue that government intervention is necessary to protect consumers from the growing reach of big tech. While innovation and progress are important, they should not come at the expense of basic human rights, namely, the right to privacy. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR) is a prime example of how regulation can work to strike a balance between technological advancement and the protection of individual privacy. GDPR mandates that companies obtain clear, informed consent from users before collecting their data, provides consumers with the right to access and delete their data, and holds companies accountable for breaches of privacy. It represents a model that privacy advocates believe should be expanded globally, particularly in countries like the United States, where there is currently a lack of comprehensive federal privacy laws. Regulation, in this view, is not about stifling innovation, but about ensuring that companies operate responsibly in a digital age where personal data is as valuable as currency. Privacy advocates argue that tech companies, while they may have the freedom to innovate, should also bear the responsibility of safeguarding the personal data of their users. Privacy regulations would compel companies to be transparent about their data practices, empower consumers with greater control over their personal information, and establish stricter penalties for breaches or unethical data use. The result would be a more balanced, ethical relationship between consumers and tech companies, one that prioritizes the protection of individual rights over profit-driven motives. Ultimately, the case for regulation is rooted in the belief that privacy is a fundamental human right that should not be infringed upon by corporate interests. In a world where personal data is increasingly commodified, regulation is not just a preventative measure. It is a moral imperative to protect individuals' freedoms and security in the digital realm. By holding tech companies accountable for their data practices, we ensure that privacy is not just a privilege for the few, but a right that is accessible to all, regardless of the technological advances that shape the future. On the other side of the debate, tech entrepreneurs and industry leaders argue vehemently against heavy-handed government regulation, believing that it risks stifling innovation and limiting the potential of technological progress. From their perspective, the freedom to operate in an unregulated environment has been the driving force behind the extraordinary growth of the tech industry over the past few decades. Companies like Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook have revolutionized entire industries, creating new products and services that have transformed economies, created millions of jobs, and improved the daily lives of billions of people. The ability to collect and analyze data has been crucial in this process, allowing tech companies to tailor their products to the needs and preferences of their customers and offer them highly personalized experiences. In the eyes of many tech entrepreneurs, regulation, especially when it comes to privacy, risks imposing barriers that would hinder their ability to innovate. Data, after all, is the lifeblood of modern technology. The algorithms that power everything from recommendation engines on Netflix to targeted ads on social media rely on the continuous collection and analysis of data. This data is what allows companies to provide more efficient services, develop new technologies, and push the boundaries of what is possible. When government regulation imposes limits on how this data can be collected or used, it can slow down the pace of innovation. Entrepreneurs argue that, rather than creating barriers, governments should focus on creating an environment that fosters innovation, one that encourages experimentation and development without heavy regulatory restrictions that could curtail progress. Moreover, many tech entrepreneurs argue that the market itself, not the government, is the best mechanism for holding companies accountable. If consumers are concerned about privacy, they can choose to use services that prioritize data protection or opt out of platforms that they believe violate their privacy. In this view, the power of choice and consumer demand is the most effective way to ensure companies act ethically. The market operates on a system of supply and demand, and if a company is not transparent or responsible with its data, consumers will seek alternatives, forcing companies to adapt to consumer needs. Forcing companies to comply with restrictive regulations, on the other hand, could lead to inefficiencies, higher costs, and reduced competition. It could create a situation where smaller startups and newer entrants to the market are disproportionately impacted, unable to compete with larger, well-established tech giants that can more easily absorb the costs of compliance. Furthermore, tech entrepreneurs argue that regulation can be a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to global competition. In an increasingly interconnected world, countries like China are making significant strides in technology, with far fewer restrictions on data use. If the U.S. were to implement overly stringent regulations, it could risk falling behind other countries that are less encumbered by privacy laws, creating a disadvantage in the global tech race. Innovation, in this perspective, requires flexibility and the ability to adapt to changing markets, and regulation could slow down that process. Instead of regulation, the focus should be on developing robust privacy standards that companies can voluntarily adhere to, creating a self-regulatory environment that encourages responsible innovation without stifling growth. In essence, the case against regulation is grounded in the belief that the tech industry thrives on freedom and that innovation should not be limited by government interference. Regulations, while well-intentioned, have the potential to create unintended consequences that could undermine the very advancements that make tech companies a driving force for economic and societal progress. The solution, according to this perspective, lies not in regulation, but in education, transparency, and market forces, which will naturally encourage companies to prioritize privacy without stifling innovation or competition. While the arguments for and against regulation are compelling, the key to resolving this issue may not lie in choosing one side over the other, but in finding a middle ground where innovation and privacy protection can coexist. The question should not be whether regulation should exist, but how it can be crafted in a way that protects consumer rights without stifling the very innovation that has led to the technological advancements we enjoy today. One potential solution lies in creating privacy regulations that are flexible, transparent, and adaptable to the rapidly changing tech landscape. A good starting point could be the concept of privacy by design, which emphasizes that companies should integrate privacy protection into their systems from the very beginning of product development. Rather than seeing privacy as a compliance burden, companies should embrace it as an integral part of their value proposition. By adopting privacy as a core principle, tech companies can ensure that they are not only safeguarding user data, but also building trust with their customers. In this model, regulation would act as a guide, providing companies with clear standards to follow while still allowing them the freedom to innovate and create new products. This would help create a balance between the rights of consumers and the need for businesses to grow and experiment. Furthermore, regulations could focus on transparency and accountability, rather than restricting data collection altogether. Companies should be required to provide clear and accessible explanations of their data practices, including how they collect, store, and use consumer information. Consumers should have the right to opt in or opt out of data collection with full knowledge of what it entails. This would empower consumers to make informed decisions about the services they use, while also encouraging companies to be more responsible in their data practices. Stricter penalties for data breaches and negligence could also incentivize companies to prioritize security, ensuring that users' data is kept safe from malicious actors. Finally, international cooperation on privacy standards could help create a more consistent regulatory framework for global tech companies. Just as companies must comply with different tax laws in various countries, they should also adhere to unified privacy standards that protect users' data across borders. This would help mitigate the risks of fragmented, inconsistent regulations, while ensuring that privacy rights are upheld worldwide. In conclusion, finding a balance between privacy, protection, and innovation is not only possible but essential. By crafting thoughtful regulations that prioritize transparency, consumer choice, and security, governments can ensure that the tech industry continues to thrive while safeguarding individual privacy rights. The challenge lies in creating policies that are adaptable to the fast-paced nature of technology, while still holding companies accountable for their data practices. In this way, both innovation and privacy can coexist, leading to a more ethical and sustainable digital future. As we look ahead to the future of technology, it is clear that the need for regulation in the tech industry will only continue to grow. The balance between free market innovation and consumer privacy is a delicate one, but it is also one that is vital for the health and sustainability of our digital society. Tech companies, driven by their ability to harness data, have the potential to continue revolutionizing industries, improving lives, and driving economic growth. However, this must be done with a deep sense of responsibility, recognizing that the data these companies collect is not just a commodity, it is personal, sensitive, and invaluable to the individuals it represents. The future of tech regulation should not be about choosing between innovation and privacy, but about ensuring that both can coexist in a way that benefits everyone. Privacy protection does not have to be an obstacle to technological progress. Rather, it can be an essential component of responsible innovation. By setting clear standards, promoting transparency, and encouraging self-regulation, we can create an environment where both innovation and consumer protection are prioritized. It is time for a more balanced, ethical approach to the tech industry's future. We need to encourage companies to innovate, but we also need to ensure that innovation does not come at the expense of our most fundamental rights. Only through thoughtful regulation, one that respects both the creative power of technology and the privacy of individuals, can we build a digital future that is both prosperous and equitable. The question is no longer whether tech companies should be regulated, but how we can implement regulation that fosters growth while protecting the rights of consumers, ensuring that technology serves the greater good of society.